job is it to teach young people about sex and sexuality? Whose job is it? So Janet said it's all of our jobs. Yeah. Everybody's job to teach our children about sex and sexuality. Anybody else? And I saw some comments in the chat. So we've got the parents, God, the school, the church. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who has primary responsibility? First and foremost.
Parents.
The parents have
Parents.
the parents.
Absolutely.
I think parents. I wish my mum had told me about it. I said that before. I wish she did, but she never, ever had that conversation. And I do think that's a problem.
Right. Absolutely. The parent has the primary role of the teacher. The first teacher the child will ever have is the parent. Parents. All right. So the parent is the one who has primary responsibility to teach a lot of things. Teach life skills. Teach about relationships. Teach money management. Teach all sorts of things, relationships, but especially in this area of sex and sexuality. All right. So one more click, please. Now. So now, on this little diagram here, and because we're talking about the church community specifically, now God will be the yellow ring. And now why have I done that? Simply meaning that God is our teacher, right? His word informs us, teaches us, guides us. That's what we have the Holy Spirit for. So he is the overall in teacher who is impacting the parents. The parents are the circle in blue, and they envelope that child. All of the information that they should be giving should be, yes, God-centered, Bible-based, but it's the parent who surrounds the child to give them that information. Now, I've put here, for the sake of argument, I suppose, the green dot is the school. All right. Now, we will find that there's a lot of people who will leave the teaching of sex to the school. So the green is reversed to blue in this case. All right. And so we get a lot of parents who are very hands off when it comes to teaching sex and sexuality. But from a Christian perspective, God informs us, and we have the responsibility to teach our children. The Bible speaks about when you're sitting down in your house, you're to rehearse God's law to them. That's not just the 10 Commandments. That's not just their Sunday school memory verse. That's not the extent of it. We ought to be teaching them about sex, sexuality, etc., because it's important based on everything we just looked at previously. The school has its place, but they cannot have the primary responsibility for teaching your children about sex, especially now the way things are going. I know we have some educators online. Yes, the size of the green dot, Bianca. That's right. And I've done the size of the green dot, that size in particular, to show the level of influence that the school should have, especially on a subject like sex and sexuality. Because you will find that you're going to come into conflict regarding your views, your religious standpoint, your morals. You're going to come into conflict with what the school is going to teach and their responsibility to teach. You can opt out as far as I know, but there's been a change, especially since the pandemic. The Department of Education, they want to update and upgrade relationships, sexual education, RSE or SRE, whichever way round you want to do it. And they are trying to influence. They're going to teach in primary school as well as secondary school. So don't think that it's just the older kids who are going to get taught. And what their influence is becoming stronger from alternative ideologies and agendas. So you will find that there's a lot more room and space given to the curriculum for alternative agendas that you as a believer may not support. All right?
Yeah, good night, Suzuki. I was just going to interject when you talked about alternative agendas. Recently, in like when they're pushing the LGBTQ, the new argument now is not because you have a womb does it make you a woman.
That's right.
So a womb no longer makes you a woman. And I think I was delivered in like a PSHE year 7 class. So we've got these impressionable 11-year-olds considering that you're not, this idea of girl and boy doesn't exist anymore. They're trying to disregard those kind of gender specific pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like you're saying, it's important that the parents are enveloping with guidance from the word for our kids, so that when they're in school, yeah, you can respectively listen, but you also need to be able to can feel free that you can voice your opinion in a productive way, that you don't feel like you're challenging the status quo, as they'd say.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So on to
And
say.
thank you so much, Kim. Thanks for that. We are becoming, I suppose, what's the word? We're being seen as archaic in our views based upon what the current mood is around sexuality, around gender, around identity. Our views as Christians are being looked upon as old fashioned, homophobic, every kind of phobic you can think of. And so we're becoming at odds with the system. I think Bianca put in the chat that we can no longer opt out of sex education for our children now. And although they say that it's down to the school specifically as to what elements they put in the curriculum around sex, but it's getting to a place where we won't have choice. And a parent's job nowadays is twofold. You send your you send your child to school to get an education. Yes, you do. It's your responsibility. But you also have a job now to almost uneducate them when they come home. Consider how much time a child is spending in school, almost matching the hours of a full-time job. Some of them, right? Imagine how much time we're giving our children to the establishment, who therefore doesn't align with our views. And then now we have to make sure we're spending time to almost uneducate them from what the system is saying. That's how serious your role as a parent, youth leader, whatever your role is, that's how serious your job is now. All right? I know there are a lot of educators on the line, teachers, etc. Does anyone want to tell me what the current rules on the DFE from the DFE are regarding sex and sex education? I did mention some. Don't know if Bianca can unmute at the minute.
Okay.
Hi, Bianca, go.
Sorry. So following the Ofsted report that basically stated that sexual harassment and sexual abuse is obviously commonplace within schools, primary and secondary, the RSE curriculum that was rolled out in September 2020, there is a I think it's 15 pages, there is a descriptor for every year group. So it says by the end of Key Stage 1, students must know and remember, and it has a whole load of descriptors. By the end of Key Stage 2, by the end of Key Stage 3, 4, 5. So it does detail, and it has a load of bullet points of what has to be covered and what the children need to learn. It doesn't say how it needs to be covered. So, for example, in my school, we do lessons. We have timetabled lessons. But in some schools, they do it through assemblies. They do it through drop-down days. But essentially, the curriculum and the legislation states that by the end of this key stage, so by a child reaches this age, this is what they need to know and remember. And it's very explicit. So it will say that you have to introduce children in key stage 1 to same-sex relationships. So mummy and mummy, daddy and daddy. And no longer are you allowed to opt your children out of those lessons or assemblies. It makes it very clear. I know there was a whole thing in Birmingham where the local mosque got together and they did put a petition towards a primary school. But now, moving into 2022, I work in a heavily 85% Black, African, Nigerian. Lots of my parents are pastors, preachers, evangelists, and they cannot opt out for their children to be excused from the lessons where we're teaching. To year 7, we're teaching them Planned Parenthood. We're teaching them artificial insemination. We're teaching them how same-sex parents can have children in multiple different ways. It's a document that's available. I'll see if I can find it and drop it into the chat. But it's something that should be on every single school website. I know it's on my school website. So parents can actually go onto the school website, their own school website, and they should be able to see the RSE curriculum. They should be able to see that at this stage, at this day, at this time, during this month or during this half term, this is what my child will be learning. Something that we do in my school, because I am the person that plans the whole of the relationships and sex education curriculum, but something that we do in my school, knowing that we have a heavily populated Black, African, Nigerian parent community, is we do focus groups. So when year 9s are about to do in the summer term relationships and sex education, and they're going to learn all about STIs and sexual health, we invite the year 9 parents in so that we can run through the content with them. So these are just some things that I know that my school does and some schools are doing. But ultimately, as a parent, you cannot say my child is not attending that lesson. You can't.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Well said.
Right.
Thank you so much for participating and sharing your knowledge with us. I was looking at the DFE's curriculum and what they have laid out for RSC, and it was long, it was detailed, and it was deliberate. It was intentional. They have a plan and they are going to execute it with or without your consent. And so we are now at, I would say, if this doesn't open our eyes as to what we should be doing as a church community, I don't know what else will. If we don't start doing what we need to do as a church community in teaching and having alternative sources of information alternative curriculums, our own schools would be a good start, because we can't opt out. And the change was nicely timed with the pandemic. Oh, would you look at that? When all was quiet and everybody was sleeping, bang, this change came in. Deliberate? Okay. Let's move on.